as it relates to the media and how powerful they are, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or most of the mainstream media outlets, and just how absurdly left-leaning they are. As a journalist, one, like, how do you combat that? And two, where do you even fucking go from there?
Well, this is a very important thing to talk about to me, and also one that I feel very painfully, because it makes my life hell, to be honest. I don't like cages, and for me, parties and labels and all of that, they're cages, right? I mean, so I don't identify as I don't identify myself politically like that. I've just always been that way. I know what's right, and I know what's good and what's not good. And when I meet people, I'm not looking at what party you belong to, or defining you because of where you live. Oh, you live in California, you must be, crazy liberal or whatever. You live in Texas, you got to be a right-wing racist redneck, right? Republican kind of thing. I hate those stereotypes. First of all, they're just ridiculous. And secondly, they're not honest. And thirdly, they get wielded like weapons to silence people. So this conversation can be had on several different levels. One is an emotional level, perception, how we feel about it, all of that, my personal experiences. But maybe the best place to start is with the facts, right? You say the media is mostly liberal. Do I agree with that? Does everyone listening agree with that? What's our position on that? I agree with you. It's true. Why? Why can I say that with certainty? Well, first of all, because I've been part of this for all my life. I'm 47 now, and I've been a journalist since I was 17. And the media everywhere is mostly liberal, not just in the US. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? No one's registering Democrat when they're rarely a Republican. So the facts are on the side of what you just stated. Most journalists are left or liberal or Democrat or whatever word you want to give it. I always joke that the other 14% were too lazy to register. Yeah. And there's maybe 1% that's on the right. Yeah. That's a joke, but really when you think about it, visually, anyone who's ever been to Israel and been to the Wailing Wall has seen that the women have this tiny little spot in front of the wall to pray, and the rest of the wall is for the men. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a great representation of the American media, is that, in this tiny little corner where the women pray, you've got Breitbart and Fox News and, a few others. And then from there on, you have CBS, ABC, NBC, Huffington Post, Politico, whatever, right? All of them. And that's a problem for me, because even if it was reversed, if it was, mostly, right, on the right and a little bit, that would also be a problem for me. My experience has been that the more opinions you have, the more ways that you look at everything in life is complicated. Everything is gray, right? Nothing is black and white. Mm-hmm. You never have a fight, even the ones where you really think that you're in the right, where you're right about everything. So someone very smart told me a long time ago that, how do you know you're being lied to? How do you know you're being manipulated? How do you know there's something not right with the coverage? When they simplify it all, and there's no gray. There's no gray. Mm-hmm. It's all one way. Well, life isn't like that. If it doesn't match real life, it's probably not, something's wrong, mm-hmm. right? So, for example, all the coverage on Trump all the time is negative. There's nothing, no mitigating policy or event or anything that has happened since he was elected that is out there in the media that you can read about, right? Well, that tells you that's distortion of the way things go in real life. So my starting point is, okay, if I want to find the truth, where do I begin? I begin there, and I investigate from that point onwards. It's got nothing to do with whether I like Trump or don't like Trump, right? Or whether I believe him or don't believe in him, or identify with him, don't, whatever. I don't even want to have that conversation, because I approach that the same way I approach anything. I find that is not a popular way to work in the media today. Because although the media has always been, historically, always been left-leaning, we've abandoned our pretense, or at least the effort, to be objective today. The former executive editor of the New York Times has a book coming out, Jill Abramson, and she says we would do, I don't know, dozens of stories about Trump every single day, and every single one of them was negative. She said, we have become the anti-Trump paper of record. Well, that's not our job. That's a political position. That means we've become political activists, in a sense, and some could argue propagandists, right? And there's some merit to that. So it doesn't mean that everything that's written is untrue. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't say anything about where I stand on it. I do my job today the same way I've always done it. Whether I'm reporting for CBS Radio or a newspaper in South Africa or 60 Minutes, my process doesn't change. I am consistent. Hopefully I get a little better at it, but regardless, I am consistent. So if I'm doing my job exactly the same way today that I've always done it, and suddenly today that makes me a Nazi and a fascist and, some kind of Trump lunatic, I'm like, how did we get there? So it's bad enough that in the media we lean towards one side of the political spectrum or we favor one ideology. But you could argue that that's just a function of the way it is, and that there's enough good journalism out there and there's enough in accountability that we at least get a decent representation of the truth a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. I don't even see that happening today, right?
And when it does, you're a fascist or you're crazy
or how would you even know?
Yeah.
Because at this point, the level of mistrust in the media is so high, and people really don't know what to trust anymore, what they can rely on.
Yeah, I mean the Trump coined phrase, the fake news. It's started as a joke, but Christ, it really is kind of that way. I mean, just like you said, there's so many times, especially if it's from a specific news outlet, specifically say MSNBC. I mean, you can rest the fuck assured that it's going to be, they're going to cherry pick the most significantly negative components to the story.
And people would counter that by saying, well, Fox is going to do all the positive stuff. But this is the problem that I have. There's one Fox. Yeah. There's one Fox. Yeah. And there's many, many, many more organizations on the left. So if you say, well, people, they're lying about this and this propaganda and whatever, and they're pushing their viewpoint. Oh, well, the other side does that too. Yes, both sides do terrible things. Both sides lie. Both sides manipulate. Both sides, push their point of view. But the problem is that the weight of all of these organizations on one side of the political spectrum. Yeah. When you turn on your computer or you walk past the TV or you see a newspaper headline, in the grocery store, if they're all saying the same thing, the weight of that convinces you that it's true. Yeah. You don't question it because everyone is saying it. Yeah. And unless you seek out Breitbart on your computer, you're probably not even going to know what the other side is saying, right?
Yeah, because it's not just mainstream media, right? It's social media. I mean, it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. All of it is. I mean, even Google for that matter. And we don't even question if what we see on social media is real or not. We don't even question if a grassroots movement is really grassroots. There's a way to start a grassroots movement. Yeah. You write an algorithm and you create all this outrage, right? And you're throwing out all the sparks that light the fire. Yeah. So then it becomes a grassroots movement because it takes nothing to set that in motion. But did it really begin as one? And if it didn't begin that way, if it was manipulated and paid for by someone and serves someone's political purpose, is it really what we believe it is? Oh, well, people were so moved or they were so outraged that they all rose up and stood up against it. No, people were manipulated into doing that. Yeah. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So why that matters is because who's behind it? Mm-hmm. Who's doing it? And why are they doing it? And what else are they doing? Yeah. Those things are profoundly significant. Yeah. And we're not even trying to find out who it is, right? That really bothers me. Yeah, well, it's very 1984 Orwellian. My question to you as a journalist is that where do you go from here? How do you even try to fix something like that? Do you have any
It's
thoughts?
the bane of my existence, Mike. It's it's the shadow that I have lived with for years now. I didn't even notice that there was a bias in the media. People would say it to me all the time, and I argued passionately and ferociously against that, because I really believe that, you know, when we do it well, and the majority of serious journalists were all trying to do their best to overcome those biases and rely on the facts and good systems. You know what? You know, we have few conventions, if you like, because they're not really rules, but that you need at least 2 first-hand sources for something, right? Those things help keep you, keep your work to a certain standard. Those standards are out the window. I mean, you read one story after another or hear it, and it's all based on one anonymous administration official, former administration official, right? I mean, nothing. That's not journalism. That's horseshit. Yeah. Sorry, that is absolute horseshit. And so, how do you overcome it is a very complex question. It's not a simple question. If there was an easy answer to that, I would probably be doing that. Mm-hmm. I've thought about, I believe, and based on my experience, that people on all sides of the political spectrum really do want to know the truth. That even when they don't like the truth or it makes their lives more difficult, people realize that it's better to deal with the truth and come to terms with it and overcome it if you can, than it is to live a lie. Mm-hmm. And it really doesn't matter whether people, sometimes, I'm talking to people who agree with a lot of what I believe in. Sometimes I'm not. But over and over and over again, people say to me, why aren't there more journalists saying this kind of stuff? Why aren't there more journalists who doing the work that you're doing? Why aren't there more journalists, owning this? Because I always say the responsibility for fake news begins with us. If we bear some responsibility for that, and we're not taking ownership of that and addressing it, we just want to blame it all, on somebody else, and that's not how life works, right? Yeah. It's not how life works. So again, that analogy. Is that how it is in real life? Yeah. No. So why is it like that in this case? Yeah. So I do think that that people journalists have to stand up, and we have to back each other. And I don't mean backing someone being rude at a press conference at the White House, because quite frankly, I haven't seen a lot of that kind of behavior in my lifetime. I never saw someone treat George Bush like that. And I say that to my colleagues, and they say, well, George Bush never treated us the way, this president does. And I say, well, yeah, but I don't tell my kids, oh, that kid's an asshole, so you can just be an asshole to him, right? Yeah. I tell my kids, you have to consistently live to the standards that you have set for yourself. And even when someone's an asshole to you, you still have to be the better person and a good person, and you have to rise above it and not sink to their level. So what happened to that, right? Yeah. So it's not, the problem is today that when you do try to stand apart from the crowd, from the mass of the media, right? And stray, if your narrative strays from the narrative that's really being pushed politically more than anything else, you're instantly a target. Like, I made one random comment about Benghazi in 1 hour and a half presentation that lasted seconds, basically. I mean, if it was a minute, I doubt it was a minute, but I've never actually timed it. And that was used to say that I should never have reported on Benghazi because I was biased. But you've got journalists standing up and saying, this president is a danger to all of us. He's the most, terrifying, terrible thing to have come along in a long time. We have to take a position against him and make sure, that he doesn't continue to harm all of us. And they're seen as independent and objective. Yeah. Well, that's ridiculous. So there's so much, but no one's going to argue with that. With what they're saying. Because they want that. And they control or have influence over or effect or have sympathetic ideological, beliefs as people across the vast majority of the media.
Yeah.
So that's the problem, is that you get targeted. I was targeted by Media Matters for America, who was an organization that was established by David Brock, who has dedicated himself to the Clintons, because he lied about them during the Whitewater investigation, and the rest of his life's been dedicated to them.
Yeah.
And they're a known propaganda organization who said that their stated intent was to destroy anyone who they saw as a threat to Hillary Clinton's bid for power. So when I happened to do a story about Benghazi that, honestly, I can tell you with absolute sincerity, was really nothing to do with Hillary Clinton for us, which is maybe stupid to people listening to that, naive. But that began for us as a story about, two Delta guys who begged everyone in Tripoli for money and hired a plane and flew into Benghazi and went to save people without ever being ordered to do so.
Yeah.
That's why I did that story. I wasn't thinking about Hillary and the election. I was thinking about an untold story that nobody else knew about. And I waded into political territory very naively and paid for that heavily.
Yeah.
But nothing that was said about me in the wake of that was true, right? None of it was true. But because you have social media, where these days, anyone can accuse you of anything, and you can't defend yourself.
Well, and it sticks until you prove it otherwise,
And how do you prove it otherwise?
Yeah.
How do I prove that I'm not, against Hillary Clinton or, Republican or whatever? Why should I have to prove that, first of all? And anyway, what if I was like a Republican, right? Would that be so evil? I mean, I'm not, and I'll never join a political party, and I probably will never vote in this country because that would be used against me. To me, that would be career suicide, right? I'm never going to do that because I can't. Because I don't care who's in power in terms of doing my job, right? That's not my that's not my business. It's not so much that it impacts what I do, of course, and I pay attention to it. But it's not about what I want. My job is to try to get to the truth and to find out how to tell this story in the way that matters most and is the most honest. Because we can be very manipulative and very dishonest when every one of our facts is correct, right? Mm-hmm. At 60 Minutes, often we would say, after going through a script 400 million times, we would do it again just before we go to air and say, is it fair to say this? Is this right? And we'd challenge each other, right? And sometimes you would defend something, or someone on the team would defend something, and you would say, no, this is true, and this is true, and this is true, and we got it from here, and we got it also from there, and so, there's nothing wrong with that. And I remember more than once, many times, looking at someone and saying, but we're giving the impression that this is the truth, that this is what's true. Like, the way that sentence is written, or where it comes in the story, or the amount of time we're spending on this issue, it's giving people the impression that something else is true. And we don't know that's true, or we know that's not true. Sometimes we actually do know that's not true. So we may have the fact, but the way we've used it in the story, we've been exceptionally dishonest. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally, right? So there's lots of ways to be manipulative or to be dishonest or to create perception, right? Without having the facts. And not everyone has the luxury sometimes when you're rushing to air to think about that and to go through it and to work at that level, right? But this idea that we're just the innocent bearers of the truth today, and we're being unfairly attacked, and we're under siege like never before, and unprecedented times, and all those hyperboles, breathless hyperboles that I hear all the time, they make me crazy, but none more so than the idea that it's never been more important than now for us to do our jobs. Yeah. No, it's like I've done my job to the best of my ability from the moment I started this job, when I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I will do it to the best of my ability till the day I die. And it doesn't, if whoever's in power, it's going to be the same. This idea that we need to now be professional and vigilant. No, we always need to be professional and vigilant. We always need to have moral courage. Yeah. We always need to be, diligent. It's like, that's just the biggest cop-out ever. Yeah. And I've never seen myself as a victim. So this idea that we're the victim of this evil guy who's turning everyone against us. People gravitate towards the truth. They know what's real and what's not real, ultimately. And I'm responsible for my own actions. I concentrate on what I can do to be better and to be honest and to stand up for what I believe in. And I don't let people define me, and nobody owns me.
Yeah.
And you would think that that would be really popular in the media, right?
Yeah, well, it should be, but
but it ain't.
But it's come full circle to how you were raised, right?
And I want to say really, really, really loudly, one ideological perspective on everything never leads to an open, free, diverse, tolerant society.
Yeah.
Right? The more opinions and views and people and of all everything that you have, the better off we all are. And so creating one morally defensible position, one ideological position on everything throughout your universities, throughout academia, in school, in college, in academia, in media, in everywhere else, that's what concerns me. Mm-hmm. I don't have to agree with everybody, and I don't mind telling you if I don't agree with you. I'll always listen and try to understand, but I don't mind telling you. I'll be straight up. But what bothers me is not that it's the left or the right. What bothers me is that it's one ideological position, one ideological view of everything. And if you move off that narrative in any direction, you're worthless.
Yeah.
And that is, wow, how did we get there?
Yeah. To me, as a kind of an outsider from a media standpoint and a political person looking in, to me, sometimes something I say a lot is some of the world's most complex problems actually require the simplest solutions. And I think with this, what it makes me think of is just, to oversimplify it, it really boils down to accountability. Is that whether it's politics or reporters, is that if you hold your own side as accountable as you would the other, everybody wins.
Yes. Well, that's what the First Amendment is about, right? Free speech isn't about, all of us like blowing off steam.
Yeah.
I mean, what it's really there for is accountability.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
So you realize that when you see people break the law, for example, and if they're not held accountable, they didn't break the law.
Yeah.
They walk.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Accountability is so profoundly important and significant. And that is why we're here as journalists. We're here not to hold people accountable as a substitute for the rule of law or for the courts. Trial by media, while it may have its moments where, sometimes if you can't find justice anywhere and this is the only, this is the only way really to go from injustice to justice, that's one thing. But what we seem to be doing today is substituting the law and the courts for trial by media, and that really disturbs me. That bothers me a lot. Keeps me up a lot at night. I don't want to say terrifies me because we're in the age of hyperbole at the moment, and I can't stand, words like unprecedented are thrown around constantly. These are unprecedented times, really. So, heading into, the Vietnam War or during the communist trials in America and at other points in history, there's never been a time more important than this one or more difficult or more whatever. Like, this is what we do today. This is what bothers me. We're told over and over and over again that America is so divided, right? We're in this terrible situation right now because we're so divided. And we all accept that we're divided. But if you think about it, 40% of the electorate is in the middle, right? And has been for a very long time. All the elections in our lifetime and in memory, most of them, not all, but most of them have been close, right? There's no landslides. I think, the last time there was a landslide was decades ago. So if elections are won by the narrowest of margins, well, that tells you we're not divided, doesn't it?
I mean, I guess there's multiple ways you can look at it. Can you?
Is there something new? Is there a new issue? I mean, abortion is not new. Race is not new. I mean, immigration is not new. I mean, yes, people have strong feelings about these things and they disagree, but I don't believe we are so divided. I think that what's happening is every day we're amplifying the differences.
True.
And we're focusing on those things and making them seem as if they represent the whole. And there's a lot of things that we agree on.
Yeah. I mean, when you have, there's a couple things. I think when you have social media and its ability to give people two things. One is time to respond instead of off the cuff. And I think more importantly, the other thing is a lack of accountability. Is whether it's anonymity or the fact that you can talk to somebody how if you were in person, rest the fuck assured you would not talk to them that way because you'd be held accountable for your fucking mouth. And because of that, I mean, I don't give a shit what any, beta fucking bleeding heart asshole wants to say. That the reality of human nature is violence is the gold fucking standard. And if you disrespect somebody enough to their face, you're going to be held accountable for it. And the fact that there is a vacuum of that in our society now, and it just compounds on itself over and over, I think it makes it very easy for, I'll use Soros as an example because it gets amplified, but people like him, Koch brothers on the other side, same fucking thing, is that they have a much more ability in terms of power and influence to be able to divide people and to piss them off and to manipulate their emotions and make them to seem angrier than they actually are about things. But
the problem, Mike, that you're hinting at there is that you just did that thing of the same thing on the other side because you don't want to be seen as accusing, one side of something that both sides do. And you're absolutely right. The difference is that whatever someone on the left wants to whatever message they want to put out there, however they want to influence people, they have a much bigger, louder megaphone than people on the other side.
For sure.
That changes the game entirely.
Yeah.
Right? And completely. So what social media has done is, in one sense, it was supposed to have given us more freedom and made us, more powerful and given us access to more knowledge and information than any other time in history. And on the other side, in fact, what it's done is silence more people, right? You only have to look at the last election to see that. Social media and the media and these made it a terrible, terrible thing for anyone to stand up in public and say they supported Donald Trump. So most people lied about it. So if there were any polls that were actually looking for the truth and not trying to, not trying to substantiate a pre-desired an outcome that they intended to get no matter what. If there were polls who were actually asking people honest questions, wanting an honest answer, they didn't get one a lot of the time because you'd have to be suicidal to stand up in public and say you supported Donald Trump, right? I mean, that was akin to walking with the devil and being one of the worst people on earth. I think, what did Hillary call it? Deplorable, right? You jump right in the basket. Who wants to be in that basket, right? That's embarrassing. Nobody wants to be in that basket. So that's what I find that causes me a lot of concern is that information now has become much more powerful weapon. It was always powerful. The pen has always been mightier than the sword. But with the rise of social media and the cover it gives people, you don't know if any of these people writing on any of these websites are really outraged, people driven by their conscience, standing up for what's right. They could be paid political propagandists. They could be ideologically part of an organization and an organized movement. They could be an algorithm, for all you know, right? I mean, we think things go viral because everybody loves them. No, things go viral because YouTube has people on their staff who write the algorithms that push those things forward to be in a position where they can go viral, right? I mean, without that, ask someone from YouTube what the chances are that your stuff really goes viral. That's, that's an entirely different equation if you look at it like that. And really, the disturbing part for me is also that we don't ask those questions. Like, who's paying for it is one of the oldest questions in history. But we never ask that. When people show up to protest, right, to do a big mass protest, who paid for the buses? Who organized them? Who organized them? Who made it possible? Who provided the infrastructure to make all of that happen? These are very significant questions. And I feel like we don't even ask them today, you know?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, and it's, you know, it's a discussion we could have for days, frankly. But,
Yes.
you know, to me, like I said, I think ultimately it boils down to just straight up accountability. And it starts with yourself, you know, and starts with whatever viewpoint that you tend to lean towards, and et cetera, et cetera.
And by the way, this is the kind of interview that is like professional suicide for me in many respects, right?
Well, I'm happy to be that guy for you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
You know what I mean? This is exactly what they target you for, is being honest like this and saying these kind of things, because it's not independent, honest voices that people are looking for. That's not, I mean, when I say people are looking for, yes, the average person out there wants that, but people who are very powerful in controlling the messages out there, they're not looking for that.
And that's, you know, when you asked before we even started, you know, why did you start the podcast? I mean, that is, in essence, one of the primary motivating factors for that, is that it does give, you know, people like me or us, you know, with this viewpoint, a platform and a medium of some sort, you know, and the neat thing about it is, you know, when you see how many people are listening to these episodes and the comments and messages that we get, is, you know, it's like, fuck, it's a breath of fresh air to hear people finally talk the way most of us actually feel, you know. And so
but you see, because you don't have advertisers that can be targeted and shamed into abandoning your program, and you know, you don't have a corporate master who's going to fire you, and and all of that. But then you're also not getting paid to do this, right?
No, I'm not. I mean, but I answer to nobody, you know. And so I mean, I do it because I'm passionate about it, and there still is, you know, the ability to monetize things, but that's not why I do it. I do it because there's a vacuum as far as that goes.